scene changed Hollywood forever, leading to the creation of the PG-13 label. Ke Kwan said that he wasn't allowed to watch this scene, and what's craziest is, I think most of us never actually saw the heart pull the first time we saw this. And really, the true beating heart of this movie is Short Round, a beacon in the darkest Indiana Jones movie. I'm Erik Voss, and let's dive into Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This was the first Indy movie that I watched as a kid because it's the one that my family recorded from a cable TV airing, and that experience, along with my dad getting called down for the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Show at Disney's MGM, made me love Indiana Jones so much that I would go around wearing a jacket that I thought made me look like Indiana Jones. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, though, have disavowed Temple of Doom, but I believe there is still love to find here. So support us with an Indy I Love You shirt at nerdriot.shop, and let's dive in. The first 4 Indiana Jones movies cross dissolve from the Paramount logo to some mountain peak, and here it's the metal gong in the Shanghai nightclub Club Obi-Wan, among many Lucasfilm references. This rolling disc will later be what Indy uses to shield himself from the gunfire. Spielberg often shows the audience all the elements of the mousetrap first, just so he can light the fuse and pay it off later. That even applies to this opening number of Cole Porter's Anything Goes. Indy later calls that back too.
I suggest you give me what you owe me, or anything goes.
At one point, each of the dancers reach across and pull red scarves from each other's chests, foreshadowing Mola Ram's Kali Ma move. And from an onstage hellmouth emerges Willie, Kate Capshaw, as she will later emerge from a real volcanic hellmouth later in the movie. Kate Capshaw learned the lyrics in Mandarin and how to tap dance, though she hardly really dances here because this insane dress designed by Barbara Matera out of original beads from the 1920s and 30s. The dress actually appears later in the movie drying on a branch, and when they shot that scene, the elephant kept eating it. And that was shot before the Shanghai scene, so Matera had to do rushed repair work on it, and on the insurance form they wrote, "Dress eaten by elephant." Now here, Spielberg frames Willie in front of the Indiana Jones text, as if this diva is trying to steal Indy's spotlight, and then Spielberg stays in a 90-second oneer until Willie shimmies back toward the stage, and he cuts right here. I love it. Capshaw makes this uncertain whoa before she regains composure. And it wasn't a natural mistake that was made at the end of the take. Spielberg cut before it and chose to put it in as a character beat to show Willie's flaws. Now, a lot of viewers over the years have been pretty tough on Willie as a character. Some accuse Spielberg of casting Capshaw just so he could marry her a few years later. But come on, guys. Spielberg and Capshaw have been married for 32 years now. It's a rare, successful Hollywood marriage. James Cameron, Marty Scorsese, they've each had 5 wives. Capshaw and Spielberg are just on their second. They're doing great! And I think Capshaw in Temple of Doom does her best to play a character that was just written to be a polar opposite to Marion Ravenwood. Now this number transitions into a full dance break in the style of a Busby Berkeley musical. The first time Spielberg shot a musical sequence that he would later prove to be a master at with 2021's West Side Story. Now there's no way Club Obi-Wan had this big of a back room, or that the nightclub audience would actually see this, so this is really a fantasy illusion. And actually this shot of the dancers perfectly popping back up from the split position is really the footage reversed. Now at the end of it, Willie looks off screen as she is locking eyes with the crime boss Lao Che. One of his sons, Cao Kahn, is missing a finger from his fight with Indy the night before. Later, when he fires the Tommy gun, that missing index finger causes his aim to be off. On his bow tie are these characters, which either translate to tall man, or in Mandarin it's really just his name, Cao Kahn. Now this is in Shanghai in 1935, set a year before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Spielberg did this to avoid Nazis being the villains again, for Raiders really to be the first time Indy would cross them. Indy's friend Wu Han warns him on his way in, a friend who tragically dies in this scene, possibly explaining why Indy had to make new friends to trust in Peru in 1936. Indy wears the same white tux with a red flower that Sean Connery wore in Goldfinger. Steven Spielberg said that when he started out as a director, his dream was to make a 007 movie, but he could never get MGM and Cubby Broccoli to hire him, so he put this homage in Temple of Doom, and it would later inspire the casting of Sean Connery himself as Indy's father. Wu Han dies.
I followed you on many adventures into the great unknown mystery. I go first, Indy.
It's so sad. Indy starts this movie losing a partner, but he ends it gaining another one. No, not that one. This one. Now, this whole nightclub scramble is so much fun. Yep, you heard a Wilhelm scream right in there. There's actually another one shortly after this. And I love how even after Indy crashes into the band, they keep playing Anything Goes. And the band cues the dancers to crowd the floor too. Some of them are still trying to stick to their routine. And the fact that everyone is still trying to work throughout gunfire just tells us that a bit of fighting in Club Obi-Wan is a common thing, because our man Obi-Wan Kenobi loves a good bar fight. They go out the window and are caught by Short Round.
Wow, holy smoke! Crash landing!
Ke Ke Kwan was one of 6,000 kids who auditioned for this part, and initially he didn't even intend to audition. He just showed up to help his brother audition. And the producer saw Ke rehearsing with his brother and loved his personality. Now, of course, after the Goonies, Ke Kwan was typecast in various stereotypical roles throughout adulthood. Now, he did work on various stunt crews, including the crew of the 2000 X-Men film, and he almost gave up on acting until he managed to get cast in Everything Ever All at Once, which renewed his career, and it's so awesome to see. Here, Short Round wears a 1928 New York Giants hat. Indy's getaway pilot Jock in Raiders of the Lost Ark wore a Yankees hat. Short Round hits the gas, and a close-up shows blocks strapped to his feet so he can reach the pedals. Later, Short Round continues to hobble to the plane with those blocks still tied to his feet. Dan Aykroyd cameos as Weber, who arranged his flight. Aykroyd, who would later co-found the Crystal Head Vodka, interested in the same Crystal Skull legend that Spielberg and Lucas obviously were for their fourth film. And Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Frank Marshall, and Kathleen Kennedy cameo in this moment in the background as the group of missionaries wearing those hats, one of them in a wheelchair. Now remember, Raiders opening ended with Indy escaping by air, and Spielberg subverts that here.
Nice try, Lao She!
And I like how John Williams ended that Raiders march on a discordant minor note right as we see the name of Lao Che. Now this flight from Shanghai leading to the mountain slide was originally supposed to be in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it was going to end with Indy rolling up to Marion's bar in Nepal. They considered it too ridiculous for that movie, but not for this movie. We see them flying over the Great Wall of China, which was also an idea pitched for this film. It was going to be a motorcycle chase on the wall, but China refused to let them shoot in the country. Also, it wouldn't really make sense here. The Great Wall is much further north from Shanghai. They definitely would not have flown over it. Now, the reason I picked Indy and Short Round's hats as the ultimate synecdoches for those characters on the shirt is the weird power of Indy's hat and how it allows him to sleep even in the loudest of places, like he's a freaking bird with a sheet over the cage.
Oh, Mr. Wait, please. You call him Dr. Jones, dog. Okay.
Yeah, Spielberg frames this shot so that Ke literally pops up from out of nowhere. And I love how Ke drops his voice on doll, which Capshaw also does with the Indy on the raft.
And I hate you!
But no, we cannot skip the insane life raft dive out of the plane. Mythbusters proved the only way you could actually survive an inflatable raft jump out of a plane is if you used it as a parachute, because the raft would just be too unstable to sit on top of during the fall. Actually, to get this shot, they really did throw an actual inflating raft out of a plane above Mammoth, California with 3 dummies in it, and it inflated fully and bounced on the first take. This is a take that we see in the movie, but you know, if human actors bounce like that, they'd be dead. Production then actually moved to Twin Falls, Idaho for that raft falling over the cliff, and then the American River in California for the rapids. None of this is in Nepal or in India, and it's a very big deal because India would not allow them to shoot this film in the country because they rightfully found the script a bit offensive for India. Yeah, devil-worshipping cults, child slavery, brainwashed government officials. I don't blame them for feeling that way. India banned the movie upon release, but has since rescinded the ban. I'm not gonna pretend that white saviorism isn't a thing in Temple of Doom, and I think we can all agree that indie movies are just better when they're fighting Nazis. Spielberg himself said Temple of Doom was too dark, too subterranean, and much too horrific, and he said the best thing about the process was meeting his future wife. George Lucas attributed the film's darkness to issues from his divorce, and that he and Spielberg's bad moods resulted in a darker movie than they intended. After complaints about the violence in Temple of Doom, Steven Spielberg suggested to the MPAA that they alter their rating system to add a new middle ground rating between PG and R ratings, which is how we got the PG-13 rating. It was this movie and its heart-pulling scene that did it. Now looking back, I think fair-minded audiences can see Temple of Doom as a campy fantasy adventure. Amrish Puri kept his bald look after this film because he loved how it elevated his career. Ke Kwan continues to defend the film. I think it's okay to love it. And whenever I rewatch this movie, I just think even in the bleakest darkness, one can find the light. So the village shaman tells Indy about the evil spreading through the land.
And again, the palace has the power of the dark light. Then like monsoon, it moves darkness over whole country.
This was Sri Lankan actor D.R. Nanayakara, and he's so good, he wipes his eyes as he says the word darkness, his way of showing that despite the famine and the drought, the worst tragedy is the tears that they've shed after the taking of their children. The shaman tasks Indy with bringing back one of the Shankara stones, and Indy folds his hands, and Short Round does the same, a gesture that Steven Spielberg also used in Jaws when Brody's son mirrors him at the table. My favorite scene of the film that I'll get to later this summer, and I'll probably cry when I talk about it. And then Indy asks about the stone.
With 3 lines across it, representing the 3 levels of the universe.
That's right.
Yes.
In Hindu cosmology, the 3 levels of the universe are heaven, earth, and the netherworld. So Indy's enough of an expert about this, but I like how this scene doesn't have him do all the lecturing. Just plays a bit better in this context than it would have been had he done the whole thing with the government men and raiders. Now, above Indy and Short Round is a shooting star. It's such a cool shot. Spielberg also captured a shooting star in the sky above Brody and Jaws right before the final battle with the shark. Now, there's an anecdote that Spielberg tells in Joseph McBride's biography about Spielberg's dad waking him up at night to drive him out to a meteor shower, which both amazed and terrified a young Steven Spielberg. So I think Spielberg here uses this shooting star as a symbol of fathers preparing to plunge into darkness to save their kids. That's why Indy does this father-son cut-you-looking bit with his son figure here, Short Round. Short Round asks,
What is Sankara?
Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory.
Now, this phrase gets repeated throughout the movie, and I think it's interesting that Indy does not seem excited here, but rather wary. He doesn't want the stones for himself. He knows faith gives these stones meaning to these people, but for outsiders, death surrounds them. So it's not his fortune and glory, it's theirs. Now, lately with the deep dive, I've been busier than ever, so I've been trying to find ways to add quick, easy, and healthy routines into the mix, which is how I got into AG1 by Athletic Greens. AG1 is a nutritional drink that makes getting and staying healthy easy. Each scoop of AG1 is 9 health products in one, giving you the equivalent of a multivitamin, minerals, probiotics, and more. AG1 offers comprehensive all-in-one foundational nutrition that will help you feel better mentally and physically no matter how busy your schedule is. Whether your diet is keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, or whatever's in the fridge, drinking AG1 is an easy way to make sure that you're absorbing the nutrients your body needs so that you can feel your best. Okay, so I'm gonna make one of these. Just 1 scoop here. Give it a nice little shake there. Wow, I really can't believe something good for me actually tastes good. AG1 contains dairy-free probiotics that protect your gut, plus naturally occurring enzymes that bolster your digestive process. AG1 supports a diverse gut microbiome, and that supports immunity. It also includes vital adaptogens that act to support adrenal health and recovery when the mind needs stress management from burnout or overworking, like this guy does. To get started with AG1 by Athletic Greens, just click the link in the description. You will get a 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D3, K2, and 5 travel packs free with your first purchase. Now, this poker argument between Indy and Short Round, so cute. It came from an improvised bit between Ke Huy Quan and Harrison Ford that they did for Key's audition. And Willie, after running into literally every animal in the jungle, she tells Indy,
My grandpa was a magician. He spent his entire life with a rabbit in his pocket and pigeons up his sleeves. He made a lot of children happy and died a very poor man.
as explored in the movie The Fabelmans, Spielberg had a real great uncle Boris, who was a circus performer that scared him as a kid, but inspired him to suffer for his art. And I think this story from Willie came from that. They head to Pankot Palace and they meet Prime Minister Chetar Lal and Captain Blumbert. Blumbert is played by Philip Stone, aka Delbert Grady in The Shining. Over dinner, Indy challenges Lal over his suspicions about the thuggy cult, while Lal pushes back against Indy's grave robbing history and Captain Blumbert's imperialist presence. Lal references Indy's past in Honduras, which would have been explored in an unproduced episode of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles where Indy met Belloc in 1920 and was later connected to the events around the Crystal Skull of Kazan in the opening of the Philosopher's Stone novel. Throughout this, Spielberg delivers gross out gags with dinner courses of pretty much every animal Willie ran into the camp the night before. Like there's a snake and she ran into a snake, and a monkey head like that monkey she ran into. And this drives me crazy because Indian cuisine is the best. They don't eat bugs. Now, according to Lal actor Roshan Seth, he says Spielberg intended this as a joke that these Indian hosts knew all these Westerners think that Indians eat things like cockroaches, so that's what they serve them. They just want to mess with them. And the actor says that the joke was just too subtle. I don't know. I think Spielberg just wanted to gross us out because it's still the 80s and Spielberg was still in a bit of sophomoric humor phase. Now, Spielberg shows Indy pacing in this room past that assassin who's blending in with the mural in the background. We see this guy twice, so we just kind of adjust to him being there, and Spielberg only has him move on the third time we see him. I really just think the flirty intercutting with Willie was just to set up that awesome reveal. And while Indy fights, Short Round sleeps with his hat on his head. I'm telling you, these guys in their hats, sheets on bird cages. Short Round wakes up and tosses Indy his whip, and we see Indy choke the guy in the shadow on the wall behind Short Round. A similar shadow technique Spielberg used to shoot the bar fight in Raiders. Indy kills this assassin. Yeah, that buzz sound effect takes us back to Marion and Indy turning away from the mechanic getting chopped up in Raiders. These movies and their propellers.
Damn it, kill me!
Indy goes over to Willie's room to search it.
Hey, I'm right here.
Yeah, she's not just surprised by the wall moving. I think Willie's thinking in this moment, holy shit, Indy's so worked up, he's gonna pound me through a wall. Indy and Short Round go through the bug tunnel into this enclosed chamber. I love it. Indy could have escaped on his own, but he turns back to realize he would have had to leave Short Round behind, and he decides in the moment to stay so the kid wouldn't be alone. It's really sweet, other than, you know, Indy endangering this child everywhere else in this movie. So Short Round trips the spike trigger, so Willie has to come save them. Capshaw said she had to take a Valium to get through the 2,000 real bugs they had on set for this. Indy growls through the crevice.
We are going to die!
Which has gotta be Spielberg giving a nod to The Shining, but like with reverse stakes.
We are going to die! Here's Johnny.
Spielberg said this spike chamber was his favorite scene to shoot, mostly because it ends with this coda of Willie immediately bumping into the wall trigger again. And this time they all dive under, and as Indy did with his whip in the Peru temple in Raiders, we see how he never leaves his hat behind. So they come upon this thuggy cult ceremony. Now, thuggies refers to bands of thieves and murderers in India from the 14th to the 19th centuries. Actually, the English term thug traces its roots back to the Hindi word for swindler or deceiver. But this cult in the movie is a complete work of fiction. They're using elements of Aztec live cardiectomies, Hawaiian volcanic sacrifice, West African and Haitian voodoo, and yeah, good old-fashioned European devil worship. They're just really sampling the darkest aspects of various cultures from across human history. And I think they just do it to make it more and more over the top so that it isn't supposed to look like any actual real group that existed anywhere. But they do worship Kali, that is a real Hindu deity, not really the goddess of death as depicted here, but a more complex figure associated with Shiva the Destroyer. Kali appears in 600 CE in the Devi Mahatmya as a battlefield goddess personifying the wrath of the Durga, seen as a skeletal and frightening crone colored black, wearing animal skins and carrying a skull-top staff. And Kali was worshipped by thuggy mystics, but today she represents duality, a destroyer of evil, a kind of mother nature. Now, Mola Ram is played amazingly in this movie by Amrish Puri, one of the most important figures to Indian cinema, whom Spielberg has described as, quote, his favorite villain, the best the world has produced and ever will. His headpiece uses the horns of a cow so that it would be seen as sacrilegious to the Hindu people, with a latex shrunken head between the horns. And again, none of this is meant to be realistic. Like, there are only 6 volcanoes in India and only 1 is active, and you would never build a freaking mine into one. So I think the more over the top the setting and the cult elements, the less we should view this movie as any realistic depiction of India. Now, if you've only ever seen Temple of Doom on cable, chances are you didn't actually see the complete heart pull effect because TV censors edited out most of this. Some reports in the UK say the scene hardly shows anything, and some American TV edits punch in on Mola Ram so you don't see the heart in his hand. And again, my family did not have the original box set when I was growing up. We just had a VHS recording of a TV airing. Yet weirdly, I have vivid Mandela effect memories of seeing Mola Ram's hand go into the chest and the chest sealing back up and being traumatized by this, even though I'm 100% certain I never actually saw this effect until I saw the Blu-ray in my 20s. That's the weird thing about memory. It just kind of colors your entire past experience. And my brain just connected the dots. I don't know, maybe it's possible a friend told me what it looked like and my memory just kind of framed itself around that. But one interpretation many viewers have had over the years is that Mola Ram maybe didn't actually pull the heart out, that maybe he's just a con man illusionist, this being a sleight of hand to make himself look powerful in front of all these cultists, that he used a fake heart with a timed flame burst to sell it, like a Joe Bluth illusion, Michael.
My illusion.
And that we as viewers, like everyone watching in this moment, including that true believer who gets sacrificed, yet is still somehow able to stay alive all the way down, we're just kind of convinced by the spectacle and the theatrics. That could be why when Mola Ram pantomimes over Willie's chest, he doesn't actually do it, and later with Indy, he's not able to do it, but really it's just a fear tactic in those moments designed to get in their heads. I think that's just one interesting way to look at it. Personally, I prefer to watch these movies where divine cosmic powers are real, and Indy has to steer clear of the wrath of gods, and know which side to pick. So yeah, my final verdict, he actually pulled that heart out. Now, when Indy takes the Shankara stones, the diamonds inside glow, and he's transfixed for a moment by that same godlight that we talked about in the Raiders deep dive. And then yeah, Indy tips his hat to the snake statue that's above the stones, a nod to his lifelong fear of snakes. But as he walks away, the snake statue moves slightly, like the shifting eyes of the fertility idol that we talked about. It's just another creepy detail to show the mysticism of these objects. Indy follows the screams of the child slaves, and the chief guard is Pat Roach, returning from playing the mechanic in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and later having another grisly death after the fight in this movie. And yeah, they did darken his skin for this. It's not great. Indy and Short Round get whipped, and it's hard to watch. Indy winces so bad that he blows out the candles, but one flame remains lit. Despite the darkness that will soon overtake him with the black sleep, the blood of Kali, one spark of hope remains in his soul, and his redeemer, Short Round, will reignite it with fire later. Now, there was one outtake from this whipping scene where Spielberg played a joke on Harrison Ford by having Barbara Streisand dress up as a dominatrix to whip him, and then Carrie Fisher runs in to protect him and gives him a kiss, and then Empire Strikes Back director Irvin Kershner runs in to scold Spielberg, and it all ends with Streisand saying a weird homophobic slur. Oh, the 80s. Mola Ram says,
"The British in India will be slaughtered. Then we will overrun the Muslims. Then the Hebrew God will fall. and then the Christian war will be cast down and forgotten.
He calls out all other world religions, which is a common thing in cults, but it's interesting that all Indy movies do kind of acknowledge a higher power. In Raiders, the Hebrew god; in Temple of Doom, Shiva; in Last Crusade, the Christian god; and in Crystal Skull, interdimensional aliens. When evil overtakes Indy, Spielberg lights him from below just as Mola Ram was lit in the scene before, casting menacing shadows upward on their faces. Just a cool thing to remind you that human beings are not supposed to look like this. It makes us look like we're wearing creepy masks. Short Round pulls off the coolest move of the movie in my opinion. He climbs up a ladder, uses it to tip over to the other side and throw off his pursuer, and then grabs the rope from the alcove above. It's really the most important move of the film that inspires all these kids to revolt. And notice how every time Short Round is in action in this movie, John Williams scores him with his unique theme. And so, the hero of this movie, the one who really pulls Indy back from hell, is this little guy.
Indy, I love you. Wake up, Indy! Wake up! You're my best friend!
Oh my god. Now it may be cliche, and yes, we did put it on a shirt, but love truly does conquer all. Every act of kindness Indy showed Short Round leading up to this, befriending this kid after his parents died, letting him cheat and win at poker, it all pays off here. Mola Ram escapes in a ridiculous moment.
Mola Ram!
I do love Harrison Ford's face here. The just happened? But the same way Indy refused to leave the spike room without Short Round, now when Willie begs him to leave, he says,
All of us.
They free the kids, and when they emerge from Pankot, they shield their eyes from the natural sunlight. Spielberg was right. For a director who loves to use natural light, it must have sucked to have this movie be so subterranean. Now for efficiency, 80% of this film was actually shot on sound stages at England's Elstree Studios, and director of photography Douglas Saclome captured the light in an interesting way to make it all look good. However, the Spielberg mousetrap mechanics that work so well in the airplane fight in Raiders now just feel a bit artificial. Like that conveyor belt makes a death by smushing seem inevitable, and that water tower going upward, clearly engineered for Short Round to scale up to the Maharaja with a voodoo doll. Yet still, as a kid watching this, I was just amazed by how many stunts they had Ke Huy Quan do. Like, look at this kid go! An even wilder stunt, Ke runs up behind the cart, he ducks at the perfect time for the guard to trip over him, and that guard grabs onto the cart, and in the same take, Ke gets back up and runs back up to the guard. Now there's a cut here, but then Ke runs up his body to climb into the cart, and everything is in motion. The coordination required to pull this off, leading to the Minecart chase, and it is a rush. It's just amazing to think that it was mostly shot by ILM with miniatures on a track, stop motion animation. The cave walls painted aluminum foil. If you pause at some moments, Indy, Willie, and Short Round are clearly figurines, but that's the thing, movies aren't meant to be paused. They're meant to be watched in motion. And this is all shot and edited and sound mixed so perfectly with blue screen shots of the actors and screams from the actors and Ben Burtt's sound design that we all feel like we are on this roller coaster. For the live action shots of the actors in the cart, production designer Elliot Scott built a circular track on several levels that they would light differently on each take to get different looks of the carts turning through the same bend. Spielberg and editor Michael Kahn used medium shots of the actors in the cart screaming and reacting, and then they splice in these shorter shots with miniatures only for a second at a time to sell the stakes of it. This is how ILM shot the Star Wars trench run as well, and there's just a tangibility and intensity to the finished product that you just don't get with VFX animation. The brake lever snaps off, and he has to use his own boots as brake pads, causing them to smoke.
Water! 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 Water!
Now, the shot of the three of them fleeing the water is the same shot of the water gushing before, but without them in it. Yeah, the physics and the timing of the water don't make a ton of sense, but it just works as a great example of heightening. Like, as soon as you give your heroes a moment to breathe, you throw some more shit at them. Even when they make it out on the cliff, the rock wall breaks apart under their feet, and that leads to a rickety rope bridge over crocodiles. Though in truth, these are alligators. You tell by the rounded snout. Frank Marshall filmed these in Florida with a second unit, and in Florida we got gators. Another example of heightening, two swordsmen threaten Indy, and for a second we think we're gonna get a great callback to the iconic moment in Raiders, but Indy has lost his revolver, so we get a different kind of heightening, leading to another classic Spielberg scale reveal, where Indy chases off one thuggy, and then turns around and runs when dozens of them chase him. It's actually a nod to a similar gag in Star Wars when Harrison Ford as Han Solo chases some stormtroopers on the Death Star, only to find a whole legion of them, and he has to turn around. And then on the rope bridge, Indy's surprising knowledge of Mandarin to Lao Che in the first scene comes back here.
Chao Chi! Latsu Sansa!
This apparently translates to be careful, grab onto the rope. So Indy breaks the rope bridge, and for a moment we think Indy's gonna suffer Mola Ram's heart pull, but whether Ram's powers were real or not, Indy summons his belief in the power of the Shankara stones to make them burn. And he says in Hindi, some version of, you believe in Shiva, and he mixes it in with like English saying, you betrayed Shiva. Essentially, Indy is kneeling before God. He takes the penitent path, and he appeals to Shiva, the Hindu destroyer, to ignite the stones. While all other forms of magic in this movie could possibly be explained away, like a natural famine after the stolen stones, a sleight of hand with a heart pull, the black sleep potion just being drugs, maybe even coincidental muscle spasms with that voodoo doll. This is one undeniable form of divine power, unless Indy had like a Tesla battery in that pack. And when Molaram falls to his death, there is a Wilhelm scream as he gets eaten. Indy climbs back up to the bridge and he shows off the stone. And the 3 lines here represent the netherworld, earth, and the heavens, and Indy has climbed up through all 3 of these to finally see the light. And one thing I just noticed about Willy in this final scene, she's gone from wearing that white dress from Pankot to Indy's pants, shirt, and white jacket that he was wearing in Shanghai. Indy returns the stone to the village, and Willy says,
Could have kept it.
What for? They'd just put it in a museum, it'd be another rock collecting dust.
yes, an important lesson. These treasures don't really belong in museums. They belong in the hands of the cultures whose histories gave them meaning. Every physical thing in our lives is only as important as the human value it brings, the way it enriches people's lives. And despite Temple of Doom's legacy as the Indiana Jones movie that was too dark, too violent, too cringy, Steven Spielberg said, quote, "I came out of the darkness of Temple of Doom and I entered the light of the woman I was eventually going to marry and raise a family with." And that's kind of nice. Ke Huy Quan rediscovered the light in 2022, finally, or rather we discovered his light. How great was it to see Ke hug Harrison Ford at D23 and for Harrison Ford to present him the Oscar for Best Picture. And for me, the light I'll always see in Temple of Doom is that thrill from the first Indiana Jones movie that I was able to see as a kid, and how cool it was when my dad got to be in this world in the Indiana Jones epic stunt spectacular. It led to PG-13 movies existing, whereas a kid in the 90s, I finally got to see kind of grown-up movies where they did violent crap sometimes. So in the comments below, I want to hear what light this movie brought into your life. Let's see if we can limit the actuallys and the snark commenters and just share something that makes you happy. And support us with an Indy I Love You shirt at nerdriot.shop. Subscribe, turn notifications on, share this channel and its videos with everyone you know. Follow me at EA Voss, and I'll see you next time for my analysis of The Last Crusade. Thanks for watching, my divers of the deep.